It should come as no surprise to anyone that very few people have walked on the moon. Among them, Neil Armstrong, the first man to step onto the moon, left behind prismatic mirrors that they hit with gigawatt laser beams for the next 10 years, and that is what allowed us to track the lunation period of the moon from the Earth, and then to be able to calculate the first sliver of the new moon at any point in history. That was the key to unlocking the biblical calendar and the chronology of the Gospels. In order to understand that, literally, we had to go to and fro the moon. And then we had another astronaut that spent some time on the moon, and this astronaut, Jim Irwin, when they came back, he alerted Ron Wyatt, an amateur archaeologist, to what they could see from satellites out in space looking down at the land of Midian. And peculiar topographical situations there that it looked like this was the real Mount Sinai. After a bit of investigation for 8 years, Wyatt attempted to get into northwest Saudi Arabia, denied by the Arabian government, and so he decided that he and his two sons were going to sneak in. It became national news in America. On the nightly news, it was over and over again how these three Americans were held in an Arabian prison. They were going to be executed as Israeli spies because they were caught after coming away from Mount Sinai, but they were the ones that first opened the door to that. One of the few people that have been back to Mount Sinai. But then, our guest tonight just came back from the real Mount Sinai. And just like the few who've traveled to the moon, he has braved some great odds, and he went into this area and now is coming back with the evidence that the Israeli Department of Antiquities refused to look at. Josiah said that Mount Sinai is a literary invention. It's a fairy tale, and no one will ever find it. And that's why he refused to even look at the evidence, because he said the Bible is a lie, it's a fairy tale, a literary invention. Well, Ryan Mauro is back with us, and Ryan just got back from Saudi Arabia, and he's going to tell us whether Mount Sinai is a literary invention or if it actually was a place that you went in real time, real history, your real life. Ryan, good to have you back.
Great to talk with you.
We talked about a lot of things. You are National Security Analyst for the Clarion Project, and the Clarion Intelligence Network is like your baby. It's working with law enforcement and the intelligence agencies to help people to understand Islamic extremism and how to combat that. Now we're going back way back in history, and really way back in history in your life, because this is something that you heard about when you were a young man, I believe 14 years of age, when you first heard about the real Mount Sinai in Arabia?
Right, so I was somewhere between 12 and 14, and my mother gave me one of the several books that were out there about the topic, not advocating for it, but just said this is a really good read. Mm-hmm. And it was, and I read it, and then I just became really kind of obsessively interested in this theory that Mount Sinai was in Saudi Arabia, and that's just kind of a pattern of my personality. I get obsessively interested in something, and then I have to know every single detail, and I can't let it go. And that's what happened with the theory that Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia. Now, I didn't fully subscribe to it because there weren't really compelling pictures or videos out there, and there had been enough, when you're searching online, people making things up, not even about this topic, just in general.
Right.
And so
fake news has been around for a long time, hasn't it?
It has been. And so I didn't fully buy into it, but I thought it was really interesting. And then for reasons I can't quite explain, I just kept reading that book and other materials about it over and over again, even after I had already memorized 99% of it. I mean, if you're going to go back and read something again, it's because you want to remember what you forgot, find something new. But I just couldn't get it off of my mind. even though I wasn't fully convinced by it. And it's hard for me to explain what that was.
Well, in one way I can really relate to it because I was 16 years of age when I saw the Ten Commandments for the first time. And as I sat in that theater all by myself, my friend was actually the managing the theater, and I had a personal presentation because growing up as a Baptist, it was a sin to go to movies.
Okay.
And so I snuck into this darkened theater as if it's a porn studio or whatever. Right. It's darkened theater, and turn on the lights. They flipped on the switch, and Sesame DeMille is introducing what became. It's like I knew this was real. I knew I had to get to Mount Sinai. I knew that if I went to Mount Sinai, I would experience these things. So I spent my life researching it, in digging into it, and I still have not been to Mount Sinai, but you have. Right. These others, Jim and Penny Caldwell, there backed up what Ron Wyatt found when he was there. Bob Cornuke and Larry Williams, they were over there, and so you actually took that adventure yourself.
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What brought you over there?
It really became a dream of mine to go, but it was not one of those realistic dreams that you have. So I wouldn't say it was a goal because it wasn't ever going to happen in my mind.
Okay, all right.
But it was a nice
I can
dream.
Relate. Yeah.
And just through networking, because I was so interested in the theory and just kind of keeping in contact with people, then just out of nowhere, the opportunity came. And I couldn't believe it. And my initial reaction was, no way am I doing that. But then I felt convicted like I was supposed to go, and a piece that is not common in my life. Usually, I'm a national security analyst. I'm thinking about what goes wrong and how to handle that. But somehow I knew I was going to go and it was going to be okay. There wasn't the typical anxiety I have even on a normal trip going across the country. And so I knew I was going to be okay, but even then it was...
And you knew about the arrest of Wyatt and his imprisonment. You knew about that at that point?
And I also know Saudi Arabia quite well from studying what I do. So I knew the consequences, being beheaded, how someone could go after you and they might just be well connected and be able to get away with it. There's lots of dangers beyond just, you're trying to go and get to the alleged Mount Sinai. And so there was a lot to be nervous about, but I wasn't nervous about it. And I took the opportunity to go. And as I was on the airplane, I was thinking a lot about, well, where did this actually all start? And it actually didn't start with the book. Where I started getting my mind focused on the story of the Exodus and Moses. It actually began back in like third grade for me when I was watching Prince of Egypt. And I remembered how the scene with the burning bush and Moses, for some reason I kept rewinding and watching it over and over again. And I didn't have any type of spiritual background, and it kept going over and over in my mind. Why do I like that scene? Why does that scene exist? Why does it feel special? And just kind of saying, why would humans even have this compulsion to make art like that with that feeling? And I was just trying to understand all of that. And then I kind of forgot about it, but I realized out on the plane that's where it began. And when I finally got to Mount Sinai and I had some opportunities to walk alone by the base of the mountain, I had the Prince of Egypt soundtrack on as I was doing it. And it was just a really special moment. So even beyond the evidence that this is the real Mount Sinai, just the adventure and things coming full circle in my life to make it happen, that was more special to me than the evidence. If I came back thinking it wasn't the real Mount Sinai, I would have been okay. So that for me was a bit more of the miracle than actually what was there. But trust me, what I saw there, it made the biblical account I feel like it happened before my eyes.
Well, let's take the adventure. You flew from America, JFK to Riyadh. Is that okay? The normal route. But then from there you had to get on a smaller plane then, and you flew from there out to Tabuk.
Yep,
okay.
to Tabuk, and so that's where the fun really began. And in order to get to the mountain, you really feel like you're transporting to another universe, even though you're already in Saudi Arabia. You're kind of in another universe to begin with.
Yeah, Riyadh was a little bit uncomfortable, wasn't it?
It was, not because of where we landed in Riyadh, but once we went out into some of the more Pakistani immigrant areas, because they bring in their labor. A lot of Saudis, rather than work, you hire other people and you pay them terribly and treat them terribly.
Yeah, if you don't have most of the oil in the world, you get someone else to do the work, huh?
Yeah, and so a lot of these immigrants come and they work there in terrible conditions, and that's where I felt more hostility, where like I was walking and I had a suit on, and the entire street just stopped. And the way they were looking at me was not friendly. The friendly ones would come up to you, and so your attention would be focused on that one friendly guy, but then you look behind them, and that's where you see crowds of people looking at you. You tell they're not happy that you're there. Then you go to Northwest Saudi Arabia, and they're excited to come up to you. They love seeing an American, and one of the first things they'd say to you was, like, as the icebreaker to a conversation was, I've got to tell you something. Moses was here. The Yehud were here, the Jews. And some would say, you don't know this, but you've got to know about this, essentially saying, like, I can't wait to tell you this information. Let me show you on Google Maps where to go. I'll go with you. And then there were others that it was just a fact of life, like, yeah, most Israelites were here. Yeah, of course. And so that was really interesting to see. And so the experience on a personal level in Northwest Saudi Arabia was very positive. Once you get closer to the mountain and you go to the split rock that we'll talk about, then it gets a little bit more mixed, especially if you have to deal with security, because security was there.
Well, okay, so now you're in a private vehicle. You rent a vehicle in Tabuk, and so you approach the mountain. What's the first thing that let you know you were at the right place? When did it hit you? What physical thing was it?
If you're from a certain distance, it'll be the blackened top. And I know there's some debate about whether that's natural volcanic rock or whether that's actual evidence of the phenomenon described in the Bible of God descending like a fire. Regardless of that, it's visually stunning. So even if it's natural, it's there for a reason, and it helps you visualize what's happening. And so from a distance, you'll see that from one angle, but then also what I didn't expect and I found to be real interesting, because for me, all the little details that line up that you wouldn't think about are just as compelling as the big things that you talk about, because it takes only one detail to make the story not plausible at that location. When you're headed towards the mountain and you're going to the plain where the Israelites encamped, it's massive. It's bigger than the area where Muslims go for the Hajj to Mecca, and where there's millions. This is much bigger. So you are just driving and driving in the desert, and you enter this area, and it forms like a natural stadium. Just like you'd be going into the entrance into a stadium and you're waiting in line,
but this
it's just like it, except it's mountains.
It could hold 2.5 million people in this area.
Yeah, so it's flat, so it's good for camping, but the population that would have resided there would have been protected almost entirely by this ring of mountains. So it's like you get there and you're like, I feel like I'm entering a stadium, and looking ahead is the stage with the blackened top and other topographical features. So you feel like you're going to witness a show.
Okay, now when you saw that, you had seen the pictures that came from Jim and Penny Caldwell of the Blackened Peak.
Right.
Jim and Penny had ascended the Mount Sinai several times in the years before. They're the ones that provided Ron Wyatt with all the evidence that Ron had, and Ron then gave it to me and said, I can't tell you where I got this because the people's lives are in danger. They were still in Saudi Arabia at the time. But you seeing that, then you saw those pictures, and now you're there at the mountain, you're smelling it.
Yeah, and so that was really much more powerful than I imagined, was just getting there and then going into this like natural amphitheater, because you get the impression when you look at this story, you're like, yeah, even the shape of the mountains was constructed for this moment. And
so you were playing the soundtrack to the Prince of Egypt,
getting ready
with your headphones as you're going into this, huh?
Yeah, well, actually, I started it once I got in there, and then had some time to just walk around by myself in an area that was closed off to where the guards were, they wouldn't see me. And so that's kind of how it began. So really the first thing from there that you come across would be the Golden Calf worship site, which pictures don't do enough justice to, because that really is distinct when you're there. You see rock piles in different places, but then you come to that, and yes, it's a natural pile of rocks, but you can see the petroglyphs of the bulls from pretty far away, and you can tell that there was intense human activity of bull worship there, but it was relatively small and probably limited in time because it's not going on and on. So when some people say, well, there are in petroglyphs of bull worship going on in other places of Saudi Arabia in the Middle East, it's like, yeah, but if there's too much, it doesn't fit the story. It was done briefly, and then Moses killed them, and he destroyed the golden calf.
Yeah, that's right. So this situation happened in less than a 40-day period of time.
Right.
Because from when we entered into the blood covenant, Moses killed the bulls on the Levites did, killed the bulls on the altar and sprinkled the blood on the scroll that he had just written with the 10 and additional commandments, and then sprinkled the people and the altar. Then he went up into the mountain for 40 days and received the information concerning the building of the tabernacle, and received the tablets of stone from the Almighty, written by the Almighty, and then came back down. And by the time he came back down, and this is just a little more than 40 days later, they had already built the altar of the golden calf. And so, that's a very short amount of time for all that hoopla. And then, as you say, that ended very abruptly. About 3,000 people died because of that very thing.
Right, and then you go to the top of what I call the golden calf stand, because when I was reading the book of Exodus, what I noticed is that the structure I was looking at that is often referred to as the golden calf altar, well, it says there was an altar in front of the golden calf.
Okay.
So when I looked back at the structure, what I noticed was that what you commonly see with all the petroglyphs, that's actually probably the golden calf stand. And at the top, you can see the indentation where maybe Moses grounded it into powder, because you can tell that it's worn down on the top. There's a circular spot, and it's very distinct. And it's not. You can tell it's not a natural elevation change in the rock. So something was grounded there. Something wore down in a circular pattern at the top of the golden calf stand. And then in front, there's another collection of rocks that looks more like an altar to me. In fact, looks like what may be the altar below the split rock, where it's raised up, and the Saudis fenced that off also. Now, why did the Saudis include this other collection of rocks in front of the golden calf stand within the fenced off area? They knew that that smaller structure that doesn't get much attention had some significance. And so my thinking is that on the ground level, you can see the golden calf altar, and then the golden calf stand where they're worshiping, that's where the petroglyphs are, and the red paintings of a giant bull, and the indentations on the top.
Had not thought about that. But, as you say, Moses ground the golden calf into powder, and what better place up there high in front of everyone, grinding it into powder, then putting in the water, making the people drink it, which is going to cause profuse diarrhea.
Right.
And so, of course, the people could get their gold back, but you have to mine through their old religious system in order to do that.
Right. And you can see where the brook came kind of near there, where there used to be a river flowing down from the mountain, just like the Bible describes, and came down, and then it ends within walking distance of the golden calf worship site. I mean, that's another factor. If you mathematically, put together the number of features that should be at Mount Sinai and are at this location, it's got to be astronomical. What type of chance would be required for this to be there by accident and have nothing to do with the biblical story?
Now, let me ask you, Ryan, did you get inside the fence at the altar in the stand?
I did.
You did? Okay, well.
So did my mother, by the way, who went on the third trip with me. My anxious mother, who I brought from New Jersey into Northwest Saudi Arabia. So.
What? Your mother?
My mother did go, yes.
Wait.
And my cousin as well, who's also a woman.
Wyatt was in prison for 76 days. The Caldwells were at gunpoint. Tim Mahoney and his crew were down in a ditch with guns on the back of their head, and you bring your mother.
Yeah, it's crazy, especially because my mother is not an adventurer. All right,
okay.
So she's a little bit anxious, especially when it comes to the safety of one of her sons. So it's not the type of thought that would be realistic. But I had gone twice. Enough things had gone wrong, and we've gotten out of them at that point, where we had been confronted by security and things like that, that I basically said to my mother, well, I know what it going wrong looks like now. So it's not hypothetical. And, well, guess what? I just paid for your trip anyway. So you kind of got to go. But it was on that second trip, there was this distinct moment where I was in the car, and I've never had an experience like this. Usually when people tell me they heard from God or had some type of communication that's divine, I tend to lean towards, oh, I think you're crazy. That's just, I'm very cynical that way, right?
Right.
And so, because I'm just very literal with evidence and things like that. So I'm resistant to that. And just in like a 2-second span of time, there was just this image in my mind that was very pronounced and very detailed, where I could see and hear my mother and my cousin in the back seat of the car with me and my friend Andrew in the front. And it wasn't normal. And I had this sense of urgency from then on to get my mother and my cousin there as soon as possible. That's never happened to me.
To get them to Mount Sinai.
To get them to Mount Sinai, yeah.
Wow.
And it was a sense of that I wanted to do it, had to do it, need to do it soon, that would not be natural for me to want to do.
Well,
So,
yeah. We're going to have to continue on this. At first, Ryan, I was worried that here's a mama's boy. He can't even go to Mount Sinai and face down Bedouins with guns without his mother being there. But this is something that you really felt compelled that, yeah, I've got to get mom. I got to get my cousin. They have got to see this. And I haven't even gotten to see it yet. I've been preaching it for 20 years, and you got to do it and take your mother there.
I did,
Of all things. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back right after this message for you. We are back with Ryan Mauro, who takes his mother to Mount Sinai. You arrive there at the stadium, what you describe as a stadium, where you've got an area for 2.5 million people to encamp before the mountain. There is, as you explained to me before, there's an outcropping where it would be very obvious for Moses to stand and deliver his messages to the children of Israel.
Right. So when you read the book of Exodus and you look at this site, just more and more things make sense that you previously didn't think of. And there's a good example of that. You go to where what's believed to be Moses' altar is, with where the animals would have lined up, and it's very, very distinct.
Right. This is a sacrificial altar. You've got the gates with the turns to keep the cattle from seeing the death of the ones in front of them. This is how slaughterhouses are still done today. This very same thing. And so you have this slaughter altar in that situation. Right,
and right next to that, you see where the brook used to flow so that they could wash their hands, maybe get rid of some of the debris from the sacrifice. And so that part makes a lot of sense. And about 12 pillars there. I think we counted about 9 when we were there.
Right, and pillars and stones are really repurposed. You see stones from the temple and pillars from the temple that are in the walls of Jerusalem. They repurpose these things. You just don't throw away something that you find out there. So what originally started out as 12 pillars, it's apparent from the scripture, that's what it was, that 9 of these is what you counted while you were there, still there. And it would appear that the size of them was equated to the number of people in each one of these tribes.
Right, that's what the Caldwells, according to their calculations, because they actually dug there more, whereas I was just looking at the surface level. But just as the Bible describes, they describe the altar of uncut stone, and then it makes sense that you would have a river nearby because it would be necessary, and the remains of what should be 12 pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Pretty remarkable you have all that right in this relatively small location. But then I looked up, and there's like a ledge coming forward that seems purposeful. It's natural, but it's an interesting thing to look at, as if it's a stage right at top where someone could stand and address the people. So if Moses were to go up on this higher up ledge, he could look out, see the people, and a local Saudi actually explained to us how the voice echoes from there. It's a natural amphitheater, so you could talk to the people and they could be heard. And so right above where this altar is with the 12 pillars, you have a stand where Moses could have gone up there and read the book of the covenant, and the people could agree to it.
Okay, let's stop right there, because let's give some biblical context to this. Because it was on what would become the day of Shavuot that the Almighty literally shouted down his commandments from this flaming mountain that scared the people to death.
Right.
And Moses said the reason he's doing this is that you might fear him and always remember this day. You'll never forget the day the Almighty scared you to death with his fire and the thunder and this lightning. And then finally, after 10 commandments were shouted down, pause in the action, they said, Moses, we don't want to hear the voice of the Almighty like this. We are afraid we're going to die. You go up into the mountain, you speak to the Almighty, and whatever he tells you, we promise we'll obey. And so Moses went up in the mountain, and the Almighty said, they have well spoken that which they have spoken. Mm-hmm. I will speak to you, but I'm going to send another prophet in the future, and that prophet will be like unto you, Moses. He will hear and speak only that which I tell him, and the people are required to Shema. They must hear and obey him. And so Moses gets the remainder of the commandments from the top of the mountain, which takes basically 6 pages of the King James Version, these additional commandments. And then Moses comes down and he then writes them on a scroll. He first tells the people this, writes them on a scroll, and that is where they sacrifice on that altar the bullock, and then he takes that blood, half of it, and sprinkles it on the scroll that he's just written. It's not the whole Torah, it's just that small scroll upon the people and on the altar, and he says, this is the blood covenant between you and the Almighty. Whoever breaks it, they know what that means. Whoever breaks it dies. But to see that there's something there right at that mountain, that he could stand right there and address the nation of Israel right from there, and then step down from there, and then take all day sprinkling, shaking blood-soaked hyssop branches on the people to seal that covenant. Bam, right there. You were there.
Right, and so I
originally,
there in
the theater.
Yeah, I was originally struggling because I was thinking about how if this was done right by the altar and where the 12 pillars were, well, the people wouldn't see or hear them. You know, I was trying to think through every detail of how this would play out, and I was stuck there, and then it came to me where I just, looked up, and you're like, he probably went right there because that's where I would go if I was him. Because everyone would see you clearly. They'd be like, where's Moses? Right there. And you could hear because of the echo of how that spot is shaped. And so that was kind of profound for me. And the fact that it was a Saudi demonstrating that to me shows that even that has been passed down.
A Saudi who says this is the mountain of Moses, demonstrating how Moses would have done it.
Exactly, right. And so that put all the pieces together for me. One other element that's going to be in my video that you're showing that I think is worth mentioning on the topic of Muslims knowing about this is I interviewed a former jihadist contact of mine who used to actually hang out with Osama bin Laden's associates and Pakistani intelligence. And so you can see him speaking anonymously in my video. And the reason I put him in there is because I was telling him I did all this after I came back, and he's like, Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia with the fences. Yeah, we know about that. And he did, and I'm like, most Christians I talk to don't. And he's like, those of us that are really into our faith, particularly the jihadis I used to hang out with, we all knew it and we agreed with it because we said that meant our Sharia law was preserving this. If this was open to the outside world, people would go, they'd get pieces of the sand and they'd sell it and say this can be a miracle. And according to that Islamic belief, that now is heresy. It's a sign of idolatry, and you have to destroy anything there. You'd have to block access. But because the Saudis covered it up in accordance with Sharia law, it preserved it for everybody. And he explained to me, and I thought, that makes so much sense.
If Constantine's mother had picked out the right site, if she had done that, then you would have had all these people doing exactly that. Idolatry, like the pieces of the cross, the tons of pieces of the cross that exist, and they would have stripped Mount Sinai if Rome had, the Roman Church had control of that, but because they didn't, and it was at the end of a gun barrel, and what you had to risk to get back in there, it's like, we can thank God for the Saudis.
Right.
For actually preserving one of the most precious interaction of the Almighty with mankind, the most awesome display, I will say.
Right, and so according to this former jihadist, he basically said to me, what you have to understand is that according to our belief system, we are required to hide this and stop people from going. And so the Saudis are doing the right thing in his mind in covering it up, and the proof is the result. And so one of the arguments I'm putting forth on my own website, SinaiInArabia.com, which is a new website set up with a petition to try to pressure the Saudis into opening up the site, is yes, open up the site, allow outsiders being monitored so they don't trash the place. But what needs to be preserved is not just the mountain and the specific places we've talked about, including the Split Rock, Elam, and the whole list of it. They need to preserve the entire plain. They shouldn't build anywhere near it.
Oh, right.
Because that was so powerful for me to go and feel like I'm seeing the Exodus before my eyes. If this becomes like the pyramids in Egypt, where they have a hotel right next to it, so you have to, in order to get a picture of yourself in what looks like a total desert and the pyramid there, you have to get it at the right angle. Because to the sides you have streets and you have like swimming pools.
Oh, well, this is all since I was there.
Yeah, I mean, it's so built up that when I went to Egypt and I went to the pyramids, I didn't feel like I was in ancient Egypt. I just walked over from my hotel. I was in a swimming pool, and so I didn't feel like I was in the middle of the desert. And I would hate to see that same type of effect
like
happen to
Northwest
Northwest Saudi Arabia, and then people to not experience that. I want them to feel like they're in the Exodus.
Hey, Ryan, let's take them to the Split Rock. Let's give them a drone shot of the Split Rock as we're telling about this. Because, up to this point, we've got high-resolution photographs from Jim and Penny. We've got the video that they shot, and Ron Wyatt gave that to me, and not knowing who these people were, and he wouldn't tell me who these people were, but now you were there, and now as this drone then lifts up and flies over this rock that is split, I feel like I should break into the song, Rock of Ages cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. See, that is the cleft or the split rock that Paul said, that Yeshua was the rock that followed. This was the rock that Moses was told the first time to strike, and then afterward to declare the rock. But when he struck the rock the second time, he broke the shadow picture, because that rock was to show the Messiah, the fountain of living waters, and he broke that picture. But David said, I go to the rock which is higher than I. What do you estimate this, 60 feet tall?
I would say so, 50, 60 feet on top of a 100-foot mountain. So when I climbed it and looked down at my poor mother at the base, who was alone at that time, she looked like a tiny speck. Even the drone footage doesn't do justice to seeing the Split Rock in person. It just blows you away, and you see it from so far away. You're looking at something very odd at the very least. And what a lot of the video doesn't really capture is the water erosion coming down from that rock, but particularly on the ground level where you drive. So you're in the car and it's real bumpy, and then all of a sudden it's smooth, and it's smooth in the shape of like several rivers overlapping, as if their waves are made of rock. And it's so distinct, and you walk through it and it's so smooth. That's just so powerful. So that's got to be preserved as well, according to what we're trying. We really want to pressure the Saudis into preserving all of this so people can experience it. But visually it was very powerful. One of the other things by the Split Rock that I found to be real interesting is Jim and Penny have been pointing out what they think might be Jehovah Nissi, the altar after the battle with the Amalekites. And there's a rock structure.
That's on the way to the Split Rock. Just before.
This rock that is C-shaped and then has some collection of rocks right behind it is basically just below the Split Rock on the one side, because there's two sides.
Right. So they're coming from the sea, from the Red Sea, and they're coming up that pathway, and as they approach the Split Rock, that's where that altar is. That's where the battle for the Amalekites took place. It was before the Split Rock.
Yeah, and so I spent some time looking at that, and I found that to be more visually powerful the more I looked at it, because there's a lot of rocks around the place. But then you look at this really big C-shaped rock, and then behind it, a stone that looks very similar to what's in front of the golden calf stand. So the golden calf altar that's in front of the golden calf stand looks similar to this spot below the split rock that Jim and Penny have been pointing to, that may be Jehovah Nissi, the altar. I showed pictures of this to someone who I know that's really interested in archaeology and ancient Egypt without explaining what it was. And they said, oh, that looks just like an Egyptian-style altar, and sent me an old picture that someone drew of what that would look like, and it does look like it.
Well, let's step back and put this in context, because this is a rock where Moses, as long as he held up his hands, the Israelites prevailed. But then when his arms dropped, they started to lose. And so Joshua and Aaron get underneath his arms and keep his arms up, because this is Jehovah Nissi, or Yehovah, our banner. His name was their banner, and as long as he kept his hands up as if calling upon Yehovah, then they won. Just as it says in Joel, those who call upon the name of Yehovah shall be rescued. And so this is the monument to where you call upon his name, you keep your hands raised, declaring his name, and he delivers his people. And so then when they get in the enclave, as you say, the theater, they've already defeated the Amalekites. They're in a place of safety at that point.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's amazing. When you put it all together, and these stories that, for most of us at some point in our lives, we've equated it almost with the Greek myths, especially people in my background, where it just sounds like a story. And then you see all of these things line up. It's like mathematically impossible that all this is there matching the story, and there's no correlation. And the Hebrew inscriptions of the sandals is very near where the split rock is, and where Jehovah Nissi.
Tell us about that. What about the sandals?
Right.
What do you mean by that?
There are a lot of rocks that have these inscriptions of like feet in the sandals and little Hebrew writing next to it. And I only knew that was ancient Proto-Hebrew from talking to Dr. Miles Jones and another person who studies ancient Hebrew. And they both were saying the same thing. Yeah, this is marking territory. It's like a tribal sign going back then, and it's ancient Hebrew dating back to the time of the Exodus. Man, how much more do you want?
There it is. So you have the petroglyphs of sandaled feet. You can see the straps here. You can see the toe piece. And on the instep, the kaf, the ancient kaf, which means the sole of the foot or the palm of the hand. In this case, the sole of the foot. So they're literally saying, this is what the Almighty said. Every place the sole of our foot treads, that is our inheritance. And so they put the ancient property markers, the title deeds of the Israelites. And so that's why even the Arabs today are saying the Yehud were here. The Yehud.
That's what they said to me. It's our land, and also the land of the Yehud. One other inscription I took a picture of, I had it interpreted by two people that know this type of stuff of ancient Hebrew, and they said it means place of rest. And I thought that's interesting because it's identifying it as a campsite, just like the Bible says. But then I thought about it some more, and I looked up the meaning of Rephidim. The meaning of Rephidim is place of rest. So if, according to the Bible, they came here and they named it Rephidim, meaning place of rest, and then you find Hebrew inscriptions there that just say, for some random reason, place of rest, it's almost like they're identifying it as Rephidim right there.
Again, rock of ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. The place of rest, Rephidim. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, Ryan, we're going to have another episode, but this one is going to take up the whole time with the movie that you've done. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a great treat. I know you're going to look forward to this, and so join us again next week. Ryan is going to be back on Shabbat Night Live, and we're going to show you the actual movie that was produced for this very thing. And I think we can't say it like it's a motion picture. This is not MGM. But, when you see the startling, super high resolution footage of these things, the drone footage and all that, it's like you've been there. We've just given you a taste of this. Ryan, thanks so much for being with me. And we're next week, ladies and gentlemen, call your friends, your family, your enemy. Everyone, get them back here for Shabbat Night Live. Now, I would like to close in prayer. Yivarechecha Yehovah v'yishmeraka. Yir Yehovah panav elecha v'chunecha. Yisa Yehovah panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. B'shem Yeshua HaMashiach, Sar Shalom. Yehovah bless you and keep you. Yehovah make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace in the name and the authority of the Kohen Gadol forever, the resurrected the Messiah, the Prince of Peace, who will certainly come back and rescue his people. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, Shabbat Shalom. Have a good Sabbath. And Shavua Tov. We'll see you again. Have a good week. Shabbat Night Live. Next week, we're going to Mount Sinai at last.